Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Vintage Motocross Q&A. I'm your host, Joe Abadi. Once again, before we begin, I'd like to thank Jordan Woodworth, who's out there in Oakland. We're doing this show remotely. There's a lot of cables and phones and different things involved with the show, so we can bring it to you each week during this shutdown that we're having. I also want to thank Susie for all her support and everything she's done to make this all come together tonight. And thank you all for being here. Let's get down to the starting line and I'll tell you a little bit more about the show. In the Next Time Try This segment, we're going to be taking a look at the difference between steel sprockets and aluminum sprockets and the weights of chains. It's going to be very interesting. You're going to be happy that you're here to see this. Also, in the Moto Showcase, we'll be taking a look at a 1979 Kawasaki KX250 that was sent in by one of our viewers. Really nice bike. Can't wait to tell you a bit more about it. And here's the problem segment. We've got some great questions coming in. We'll be talking about some values on some bikes and some other things that have happened during the week with questions that have come in, and we've prepared some great answers for you. What's it worth? We take a look at a 1979 Honda CR125 that recently sold on eBay. A really nice original bike. I'm looking forward to telling you more about that as well. Trivia tonight, we'll be giving away another autographed Preston Petty number plate. Get ready. A little bit later in the show, we'll give you the question. You'll have a few minutes to figure out the answer. Call in. You're going to win yourself a Preston Petty autographed number plate. This is a great time, if you're on your phone or on your computer, to share Vintage Motocross Q&A. Just go down to that share button, hit it, invite some of your friends, have them come over, help us grow the show, give us a bigger audience. Sponsors will be happy. I'll be happy. Everybody's going to be happy. Just share it. Tell some friends about it. Also, we're on YouTube now as well. You can see every episode of all the Vintage Motocross Q&A segments that we've shot in HD. Why is this good right now? You could watch it from your television. You have a smart TV, you can go on there, kick back with a coffee or whatever you prefer. You can watch Vintage Motocross Q&A in HD on your television. Once we get to 1,000 viewers, we'll be able to go live on YouTube. That's going to be really exciting. It's going to be a great time for us. Sponsors are going to be happy, and the show is going to grow like a weed once we go live on YouTube. As always, I want to thank all of our sponsors, Preston Petty, Vmxq&A, Amsoil, FastGuyStuff.com for the great stickers they give away every week, and my friends Peg and Don Miller out in Pennsylvania. We've got a great company for a lot of years called Metro Racing. I want to thank all of those people for supporting Vintage Motocross Q&A. Next time, try this. This is something that came up this week on Facebook. I saw some people asking questions about going, especially on a 125cc vintage bike, about going toward a 520 chain kit or a 428, which came standard pretty much on all of your 74, 75, and pretty much 76 vintage motocross bikes. So what I did was I did a little rundown in the garage where I took a chain, both of equal length, a 528 and a 520 and a 428. And I did the same thing with a steel sprocket and a aluminum sprocket. Now, as you can see on the left, the steel sprocket weighs 1 pound, 14 ounces, almost just 2 ounces short of 2 pounds. On the right, the aluminum sprocket coming in at just 12 ounces. The 428 chain weighs about 2 pounds. The 520 chain, 2 pounds, 12 ounces. Again, getting near that 3 pound mark on the 520 chain. Now, when you put those things together and you put them on your bike, you could see here where the 520 chain weighs about 4 pounds, 10 ounces, and the 428 chain with the aluminum sprocket comes in at a very slim 2 pounds, 12 ounces. Why am I telling you this? Look at the weight difference in between those two things, okay? Yes, an aluminum sprocket may wear a little bit faster than a steel sprocket, but look at the weight difference. And if you maintain your chain and you keep the tension right, you're gonna get plenty of use out of an aluminum sprocket and manage to save over 2 pounds. That's pretty great, I think. Less unsprung weight, less drag on that engine, a little more horsepower in the long run. So looking at those figures, you can see now what a steel sprocket weighs, what an aluminum sprocket weighs. And this, I'm talking about this right now for vintage 125s, which can be robbed of that horsepower from a heavier gauge chain. I think it applies also to some of your bigger bikes. I mean, even if it's a 250 or even an open bike, you want to go with an aluminum sprocket. It probably won't make much difference on an open bike, but maybe on a 250 or even your 175s, your trail bikes, your KDXs, things like that, IT 200s, you might want to opt for that 428 chain with the aluminum sprocket on there. It's going to make a big difference. There was something else I wanted to talk about too, Jordan, but I think that's in the upcoming segment. It was about the O-ring chain, but I think that's coming up a little bit later on in the show. So next time, when you change out your sprockets and your chain, you might want to consider going with an aluminum chain, aluminum sprocket, and going with a 428 chain, especially on the 125s. Your bigger bikes, maybe not so much. But on the 125s, especially the vintage bikes, you want to go with an aluminum sprocket and a 428 chain. Brian Cassidy sent us in this beautiful little 1979 KX250. He bought this bike, he restored it. I'm going to read to you a little bit about it, some of the things that Brian told me about it, as we take a look at some of the pictures. Brian said to me he found this bike is from a friend who sells used motorcycles, and he posted it on Facebook, the page, and it just sounded interesting to him, and he really wanted to have this bike. It's something he always wanted. The bike is rebuilt, as to say it's not restored, it's accurate, but it's not a restoration, because Brian does plan, of course, on racing this bike. The engine was completely rebuilt by Eric Gore. All original hardware has been zinc plated. If the bolts and nuts were bad, they were replaced with OEM. For maintenance purposes, he says he went with an aftermarket engine case bolt kit, which I agree with. I think it's a good idea. And he does is going to plan on doing some racing. He's also got no leans shocks on the bike, rebuilt front forks. He restored the gas tank to an original finish. It does look beautiful. It's got a beautiful shine to it. And as far as the side panels and the fenders, you know where he got those? Come on, everybody say it. Nightmare Racing, Mark Hildebrand, Nightmare. The best KX plastic on the planet, bar none. He's got the original front wheel on there, which was all cleaned up. The rear spokes were replaced. The original hub was a little worn out. He said he had to replace that too. He went through all the wheel bearings, and he put a first over Wiseco piston in that bike. Brian Cassidy, I want to thank you for sending in your 1979 KX250 to us here at Vintage Motocross Q&A. For doing that, we're going to send you a sticker pack, compliments of fastguystuff.com. Anybody out there who's watching, if you've got a bike, it doesn't have to be a show bike. It could be a race bike. It could be your favorite bike, whatever it might be. Inbox me, send me a message, send me some pictures of the bike. I would be more than happy to feature it here on Vintage Motocross Q&A and get yourself a real cool sticker pack from fastguystuff.com. Here's the problem. This is a section of the show where every week people send in questions to us, and we do our best to do a little research, come up with some answers for them, and share that knowledge here with all of our viewers. What do we got up first, Jordan? Mike Gillespie, would you suggest using a 428 chain as opposed to a 520 chain on a vintage 125? Mike Gillespie, it's really incredible. Your question actually came in after I had decided to do that little comparison between the 528 and the 520 and the 428 chain comparison just a segment ago. Yeah, I would absolutely tell you to use the 428 chain just as I did in the last segment. And I'll tell you something else. I'm going to add a little something to it here. You know, back in the old days, I don't know how guys were maintaining bikes. You know, you didn't have a practice bike and you were probably racing every weekend, practicing a couple of times a week. The aluminum sprockets were wearing out rather quickly. These days, maybe you have a practice bike or something else that you ride. I would not shy away from getting aluminum sprockets and a 428 chain on a bike I was going to race. I think it was a good question, Mike. It coincided perfectly with what we were doing here in the Here's the Problem segment. A did chain, I've used them for years. I really, really like did chains. Honda got a steel sprocket, but I would, of course, recommend going with a 428 aluminum sprocket for your race bikes. Thanks again for the question. Oh, this is something I wanted to talk about a little bit earlier too. I got a little ahead of myself. On a 125, and I don't care if it's a vintage 125 or even a modern 125. And when I say 125, I'm not talking about 254 strokes. I'm talking about real 125 two strokes. I'd stay away from O-ring chains. I never really cared for them. I think they put a lot of drag on a 125. I would always go with a non-O-ring chain on any year 125. Just something that I thought I'd share with you guys. Jordan, what do we got up next? Rob Margella. I have an 83 RM80. It starts in 4 kicks when cold. A test with a good gauge said it had 95 pounds per square inch of compression. Would you suggest rebuilding the top end? Here's the problem, Rob. You need to know what the compression is supposed to be on that bike before I could even recommend to you that you should redo the top end on it. Okay. Now I looked up, oddly enough, I couldn't find much on an 83 RM80, and I just didn't see much. The first thing you want to do is make sure you do have a gauge. You say you have a good gauge, but do you for sure? Do you know that for certain? Can you compare it with maybe putting it on another bike, knowing what the compression should be and checking it there, or knowing what the compression should be on your little RM and using it there? You might want to check the gauge. I'm not saying you have a bad gauge. I'm just saying you should really verify what it should be. Something else that was of real interest to me when I started to look at PSI and what the compression should be on certain bikes. A KTM 85 should be 154 pounds. That's a whole lot of PSI for an 85cc bike, but on a little bit of a newer KTM, apparently that's what they call for. A KDX 175 is only supposed to be between 140 and 150, and that's on a 175. So compression could vary depending on the bike, and even if it's an 80cc bike or a 175cc bike. So you need to do a little bit more research to find out for sure where your RM80 should be. I think from what I've read from other year RM80s, it should be somewhere between 120 and 130. So you are a little low at 95, assuming that your compression gauge is correct. You're a little low at 95, which that kind of explains too maybe why it takes 4 kicks to start. Also, if you are checking the compression on that bike or any other bike, you should do it when it's cold with the throttle open. Cold with the throttle wide open, 4 kicks, just like it's taking you to get that bike started. And that's the information I have for you, Rob Margella. I want to thank you for sending in that question. I hope that sheds a little light on it for you. You got to really confirm the numbers. Make sure your gauge is correct. It probably is, but make sure you know what those numbers are first. Thanks, Rob. Sal Scarper III. Sal, I haven't heard from you in a couple of weeks, buddy. I was wondering if you're okay back there on the East Coast. I hope you are, Sal. You've been a big supporter of the show for so long. You've sent in questions and you've sent in so much valuable information to us. We share with everybody else. I'm glad you sent in this question to us this week. While removing crank seals in my Cagiva, I found some gouges in the seal area. Can this be repaired? Yeah, it can. And in the next picture, we're going to see what Sal's problem is right here. Right down there in that opening where the seal should go, right down there at about, well, let's call it 5 o'clock. There's a couple little nicks down there where somebody went in, probably with a screwdriver or some type of pick, and pried out the old seal. I would be tempted to say not to worry about it because it doesn't look that deep, but be you're concerned with it, you got the engine apart and you want to do it, I would recommend a product called High Temp Metal Lab. It is an epoxy, but when it comes out of the can, it's ready to go. It's not like JB Weld or other epoxies where you have to mix them together in 2 parts and then put it in there. You're going to use the lab metal right out of the can, but here's what I would be very, very careful with. When you go to fill that little divot right there, get it as smooth as possible in there. Push it in there with a razor blade or something else. If you have to push it in, then wait for it to dry overnight or whatever. Push a little more in. You don't want to sand this area after you get that epoxy or this metal lab in there, or lab metal. Lab metal, metal lab. You don't want to sand in there. You want to get it nice and smooth in one shot. So that's my suggestion for that. Lab metal, use it once in there, twice if you have to. Try not to sand. You don't want to distort that area where your seal sits. Thanks, Sal. I appreciate it. Hope you and your family are doing well back there in the East. Jared Wilson, I recently saw members of a Facebook group claiming the Kelley Blue Book value of a 1974 YZ250 was $15,000. A 1974 CR250 Elsinore was $14,000, and a Lido was valued at $50,000. Are Kelley Blue Book and NADA for motorcycles accurate? No, They're not. They're not. They get their information from different auctions. Auctions in different areas can come up with different results, and they come up with an average, and generally I have found that they are well below, especially NADA for motorcycles, and Kelley Blue Book too, well below what fair market value is for bikes like this. I don't think these numbers that people were throwing out here, $15,000 and $14,000, were real numbers at this time. I mean, $15,000 maybe for a YZ250A, a YZ360A, I'm sorry. But a YZ250A, I think that's a little bit rich. And the same thing for an Elsinore CR250. I bought this book when I was in Las Vegas, the last trip I was out there in January for the Vmxq motorcycle auction. It is the comprehensive vintage motorcycle price guide for this year. And they're off the mark too, as far as I'm concerned. Just as an example, and I'd be able to show this to you closer if Jordan were here and we had the AMSOIL B-Cam, which comes right in on the desk and shows you exactly what's going on here. But I'm sure you'll take my word for it. On a page right here, it shows a 1974 CR250 at $8,000 for a #1 bike. A beautiful bike. They're saying it's $8,000. Here's the part that puzzles me. They call the 125 from 1974 $8,000 too. Never, not ever, have I seen a perfect CR250 and a perfect CR125 go for the same price. They're generally about $4,000 away from each other in the fair market value in a retail environment. I also had the same thing with the YZs. They were off by quite a bit. So no, I wouldn't trust Kelley Blue Book, and I wouldn't trust NADA. Also, while I'm thinking about it, in the picture of it, it's here, right here. There's a Lido in this picture. There are probably about 10 people in the world, that can talk about a Lido or a Monarch from the early 60s, late 50s, like you see here in this picture. Some people that I think can actually have a conversation about it with accuracy and know what they're talking about: Torsten Hallman, Lars Larson, absolutely Terry Good. When you hear that there's a Lido for $50,000 or a Monarch from back 57, 58, 59, early 60s, those are replica bikes. They're not real bikes. A real bike, a real Monarch, a real Lido, which there are only a handful of, they're twice that amount. And I don't even want to speak out of turn, but when you hear $50,000 for a Lido or a Monarch from that 57 through 62 era, pay no attention to it. Pay no attention to it. So a good place to get information on what bikes are selling for is the Vintage Motocross Buyers and Sellers Price Guide on Facebook. That page was started about 6 years ago. It's got over 15,000 members, some very, very knowledgeable people there who have been restoring bikes, selling bikes, who go to the auction every year as buyers and sellers. In the album section of that page, you'll find results from the Vmxq motorcycle auction for the past 4 or 5 years. You'll also see sales that have been done through eBay that are verified through feedback, or many of them, because of the members of that page, are listed on there with bikes that we know have genuinely sold in the open market and what the price of them is. $15,000 for CR250s and YZ250As, a little rich, I think. So that's where you want to go. Check out Vintage Motocross Buyers and Sellers Price Guide. Jordan, what do we got next? How apropos. What a great segue. 1979 Honda CR125 recently sold on eBay for $3,750 in Illinois. I looked at this bike very closely on my computer. It was on eBay. It was the real deal. The only thing I couldn't really, well, I could tell everything about the bike from the pictures, and the thing I'm saying that is not original about it appeared to be the rear tire. The rest of the bike really seemed nice. The yellow zinc on the bolts and the nuts where it was appropriate seemed to be in order. The seat cover, the side plates, everything about the bike really looked correct to me. And for $3,750 for a bike that original, I think that bike was valued a little bit under what fair market value would be. I think if someone was looking at it from a collector standpoint, they would have gone probably $1,000, another $1,500 more on that bike. The owner of the bike, strangely enough, said it was used for trail riding only, and it had 150 hours on it. I don't know where he came up with that. That's not a 150-hour bike, in my opinion. I think it was described accurately, with the exception of how much time was on it, and I think the price was fair at $37.50. It had the original 23-inch front tire on it, with the correct wheel, I'm sorry, with the original tire on it. So at $37.50 for someone from a collector's standpoint, I thought it was a good deal. Trivia: if you're on your computer, get your phone ready. If you're on your phone, grab somebody else's phone, because we're about to ask you a question. You're going to be able to answer it within the next few minutes. And the winner of the trivia contest tonight is going to get an autographed Preston Petty number plate, compliments of Paul Stannard, Preston Petty Products, and the legend himself, Preston Petty. So here's the question. I came up with something a little bit different tonight. I think you're going to like it. Name 3 sections of 3 different racetracks, national racetracks, that are named after racers. I'll say it again. 3 sections of 3 national caliber racetracks, and they may or may not still be in existence. 3 names of 3 sections of 3 racetracks that are named after legendary or famous riders. Call in now, 925-234-8181. 925-234-8181. Winner gets a Preston Petty autographed number plate. Jordan, let's get to that Vmxq commercial. I love saying that every week. Kurt Leverton, Vmxq, great company. Watch this commercial.
Classic and vintage dirt bikes are more than a hobby. It's not just about the ride. It's about the work that goes in. The work that keeps you connected to the ride. It's about bringing the bike back to life and doing it with your own hands. It's about the adrenaline and adventure. And when it comes to putting all the pieces together, only Vmxq knows the bikes and parts the way you do. Vmxq. Keep the ride going.
Jordan, I think I got ahead of you a little bit before with the product spotlight. So before we get the trivia thing, I want to thank Vmxq for all their support for the show. Go to vmxq.com. They're on Facebook. They're on Instagram. They got some great videos on YouTube as well. Now, Jordan, as I said, I got a little bit ahead before in the product spotlight. And that happens because sometimes there's a little lag here between when I see a slide and sometimes I get a little ahead of myself. So in the product spotlight, I mentioned Preston Petty. Vintage Motocross Q&A is an authorized Preston Petty Products authorized dealer. And right now, as we have every week, Paul Stannard has given us a special for Preston Petty. All the products you see from Preston Petty on that wall, whether it's the integral headlight number plate thing, the fenders that we've loved since 1973, and everything else that's available from Preston Petty, this week, here's the special. Free shipping. Free shipping on all Preston Petty products. You go to their website, you can check out. When you do, you're going to get a coupon code. But you got to contact me here at Vintage Motocross Q&A in my inbox. I'll give you a code. When you go to checkout, it's got a coupon code at the bottom. You're going to put the code in there. You're going to get free shipping for the first 10 orders only. So whether you're ordering 1 fender, a set of grips, 10 fenders, whoever it is, you're going to save yourself on the shipping. And shipping throughout the country generally runs about 14 or 15 bucks just for a fender. So if you're going to order 2 fenders, 4 fenders, number plates, whatever it's going to be, Paul Stannard, Preston Petty, and the great people at Preston Petty Products is going to ship free for the first 10 people. Get over there right after the show. Contact me in the inbox. I'll give you the coupon code. You go over there. When you check out, you put the code in, free shipping. Can't beat that with a stick. This week in motocross history. This is a little something I put together. I think I did it on the last show too. I mentioned Jim Pomeroy being the first American last week to win a Grand Prix in Spain. And this week I discovered that it was the first GP of the season in 1970, I think it was. Yep, April 12th, 1970, during this week. It's not on this day. It's this week in motocross history, okay? Joe Robert wins the Spanish GP on a Suzuki. He had a #1 plate on his bike. Jordan, you got the pictures a little reversed here, but that's okay. That's Joe Robert right there. The first picture was Ben Aberg. But let me go slow here. Joe Robert wins the Spanish GP in 1970 on April 12th. Here is a picture of him. He's got the #1 plate on his bike. I just wanted to point out, this was Joel's first year on Suzuki, that #1 plate that on his bike. It was won the year before on a CZ. One of his first, one of his first world championships. Actually, he won a few in the early 60s, 62, 63, I think. Anyway, moving on, Ben Aberg wins the 500cc GP, Jordan, the Swiss GP. Ben Aberg wins the Swiss GP on a Husqvarna on this week in MX history. My mistake, maybe I didn't make it clear, Jordan, when I was sending the slides in. You do a great job every week. I want to thank you, especially during these times where we've got a little bit of a lag and things can be delayed a little bit. We're still hanging in there pretty well, I think, Jordan, for not actually being in the same room at the same time. What do we got next, Jordan? Announcements. Oh, we've got some good ones. We always do, don't we? What's up first, Jordan? VMX magazine. This is a great time to resubscribe to VMX. Great magazine out of Australia. Ken Smith has been the publisher of that magazine for many, many, many years now. And right now, with the Australian dollar being what it is, you can save about $20 a subscription if you go over there now. When you check out, either using PayPal or your credit card, a 1-year subscription is only $55. And right now, you know, the internet, Facebook, all these things are so wonderful, but it really has cut back for a lot of people on people who sell actual magazines, books, and things like that. So because of what Ken Smith has done all these years in his support globally for vintage motocross and the quality publication he has been putting out for so long, I would encourage everyone to go over there, get yourself a subscription to VMX magazine. And I've said this before, 10 people go over there, get a copy of VMX magazine, tell Ken Smith that I sent you, and I'm going to give away a subscription in the coming weeks. VMX, greatest publication for vintage motocross there ever was. VMX Radio, I want to take a moment here to talk about this. VMX Radio is a Sunday show. I will be the host. It goes on at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Sunday. I almost said maiden voyage. Well, it is kind of a maiden voyage. Our premiere show is this Sunday, 4 p.m. It's April 19th. My guest will be Warren Reed. Here you see a great picture of Warren. We're going to be talking about his amazing career in motocross, and he's one of the few that have had a factory contract with Kawasaki, Honda, Suzuki. He's also a Baja 500 rider on a BMW. So we're going to be talking about a lot of different things in his early years with FMF, where he got started at just 16 years old being a pipe builder, all throughout his career, all the things he accomplished, all the things he has seen, and he's going to be spilling the beans on a few things he told me. Some stories that you probably haven't heard or read anyplace else. So join me 4 o'clock on Sunday at Vintage Motocross Radio, not Vintage Motocross Q&A, Vintage Motocross Radio on Facebook. My first guest, Warren Reed. I'm really looking forward to it. I hope you all can be there. I want to thank Jay Estes for this great shirt. Torsten Holman Off-Road Racing. Jay sent me this shirt out of the goodness of his heart. Jay's floors down in Florida. Jay, just a vintage motocross enthusiast who's been a friend over the years. And one day I opened up my mailbox and there's this great jersey, compliments of Jay. Jay, I want to thank you about that. Susie has just informed me that we don't have a winner yet in the trivia contest. Is that right, Susie? Nobody called?
No.
Wow.
Maybe that question was too difficult.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. There's 3 racers. There's 3 sections of 3 very famous tracks, and I wanted you to name those sections. One, I'm going to make this so easy. I might as well just send somebody the plate. One is named after Danny Chandler. One is named after, well, I'm not going to tell you who the second one's named after. The second one's in Bud's Creek. So,
Oh, I got
okay,
it. Wait.
we've got a call. Let's see if this guy can get all three, though. I only gave one hint about Danny Chandler. The other one is in Bud's Creek. And the third one, I think it's in Redbud. And we're hoping that Susie can get in here in just a moment to tell us a little bit more, or to give us the phone and tell us who the lucky winner may be. If I can, I want to get back there just a second with the Vintage Motocross Radio, as opposed to this show, Vintage Motocross Q&A. Two different things entirely, two different Facebook pages. So if you're watching this show and you have liked and followed Vintage Motocross Q&A, you can go over to Vintage Motocross Radio, become a member there. You can follow us. It's a great group. It has grown so much in just a couple of weeks. Now, Susie, do we have a winner?
We have kind of a winner.
We have kind of a winner?
Yeah.
Well, let's see what we got. Hi, this is Joe at Vintage Motocross Q&A. Who am I speaking to?
Hi, this is Josh in West Virginia.
Hi, Josh in West Virginia. 3 sections of 3 national caliber tracks. One is not in existence anymore. There are 3 sections that are named after some pretty famous riders. And if you could tell me, I mean, I'd be happy with even 2 out of 3 right now, Josh. What do you got?
Well, the ones I have are LaRocco's Leap at Redbud,
LaRocco's Leap at Redbud. Correct.
Henry's Hill at Bud's Creek,
Correct.
and I have Bradshaw Boulevard at Mount Morris, High Point.
You see, now Bradshaw Boulevard at Mount Morris, I have to be honest with you here. I wasn't really aware of that. That could be a correct answer, and I don't doubt you for a second, Josh. My third one was, of my original 3, was the Magoo Double at Saddleback. But you know what?
Yeah, that was right there with Suicide Hill.
Yeah. So Suicide Hill, I think, was a downhill.
That one.
The Magoo Double, I think, was an uphill. And Jordan put some good slides together for us here. Here's a shot of the Magoo Double. Next up, we would have LaRocco's Leap. And man, did Michael LaRocco send that Kawasaki off of that jump over there at Redbud. Unbelievable. And of course, the third one, Henry's Hill, where Doug Henry did some damage to himself on the way down there at Bud's Creek, injuring both of his wrists. Josh, I want to thank you for calling in, and you kind of expanded our knowledge on the Bradshaw Boulevard. I like that. I'm going to have to check that out. Hey, listen, I'm going to put Susie back on the phone. She's going to get your address, and we're going to get you out a autographed Preston Petty number plate, okay?
All right, thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in.
It's
Thank you.
Josh. Hold on.
Josh, you get him. I think we're continuing on with the announcements now, Jordan. GTL Metal Polishing. George Lucas, out there in Western New Jersey, Southwestern New Jersey, does a great job polishing a lot of stuff for a lot of people. Does a great job on vintage motocross stuff. Why I like him is because he's a vintage motocross enthusiast, knows how to polish stuff before it needs to be plated. Give my friend George Lucas a shot next time he needs something polished. He's on Facebook. He's got a website, GTL Metal Polishing. FastGuyStuff.com. Thank you, Sean Gomes, for sending in another batch of FastGuyStuff.com stickers that we're giving away every week to people who send in pictures and a description of their bike for the Moto Showcase. Go over and visit FastGuyStuff.com. They're on Facebook. They have a website. They've got some great stickers, not only vintage stuff, but all sorts of great stuff. Warning stickers for Hondas, which we're getting a little sparse there for a while. But Sean's back on board with the Honda guys, and he's got some great stickers, logos, real nice period correct stuff. Check them out when you get a moment. Sponsorship opportunities are still around for Vintage Motocross Q&A. If you have a small business or if you have a large business, you just want to reach more people, inbox me. I'll send you a proposal to Vintage Motocross Q&A. It's not as expensive as you might think, and you could reach up to 20,000 people a week. And once we get rolling on YouTube, and that's not too far away, you're going to be seeing some big numbers of the viewers of Vintage Motocross Q&A. Once again, Jay Estes, thank you for the shirt. Thank you all the sponsors for the show. And I want to thank everyone here who has watched throughout the past couple of weeks under the circumstances that we're dealing with. Thank you so much for being here. May you and your family be safe. We'll see you next time on Vintage Motocross Q&A. Gino, come on, boy. Come on, Gino. Can you make it? Come on, Gene. Come on, Gene. everybody's waiting on me. Yeah, yeah.